Matt with Let's Talk Music. I'm here with Dagon the Destroyer. He's joining us today to talk about the new single that they're coming out with, the new movie, all kinds of stuff, man. How you doing?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on. So one of the first things I want to ask you is I'm sure you get this quite a bit, is I got the press release about meeting Dimebag Daryl. How did that take place?
So we were on the road. This was, I think I was about 19 at the time, and we had been touring nonstop. And we ended up doing a tour with Pissing Razors. And I don't know if you remember Pissing Razors. They were like one of my favorite metal bands when I was a kid.
Yeah.
They did the Pantera. They got really, I think how they broke was they did the Domination song on the Pantera tribute album, and it really it put them on the map. And from what I understand, they befriended Pantera pretty closely after that. From what I heard, and I may not be getting all the facts totally right, but from what I heard, Dime and Vinny were huge huge Pissing Razors fans.
Hmm.
They just loved the track, and they, created a pretty close relationship. So when we were on tour with Pissing Razors, we were going through El Paso, and Dime and Vinny happened to be there. That was around the era when they were doing the Damage Plan work. I don't know if they were recording or they were doing something with Damage Plan.
Right.
And I had no idea at the time that they were there. We just like we got done playing. Society One got done playing, and it was like business as usual. We After we'd play, we'd set up the merch. We'd be at the merch booth, and we would typically have a line of fans, and we would sign autographs, and you know, it was pretty just like a normal after show kind of experience at the merch booth. And I was just going through the motions, and all of a sudden I look up, and I couldn't believe my eyes. I see Dimebag at the end of a maybe 10-person line. Like it was a pretty good line, and he was at the end of the line, and it was a pretty small venue that we were playing in. I mean, maybe 500 to 800 seater. Pissing Razors at the time, they could pack those size venues all day, and it was a smaller tour, but the tour it was a pretty intense show. Um, and so I see Dimebag, and I mean, like I couldn't believe it because Dime is my all-time hero, and we were an obscure metal band. I mean, at the time, we were getting press like nonstop. We were in Metal Edge magazine. I don't know if you remember that magazine,
Oh yeah.
but it was like every single month we were in Metal Edge. I mean, the antics of the band just commanded press all the time, like Metal Hammer, Revolver, Metal Edge. We were all over in terms of the press of the band, but we were still pretty obscure. We were like an obscure industrial band, and so I would never expect like the greatest rock star of all time, in my opinion, to be sitting in line waiting to meet me, a 19-year-old, fairly unknown drummer. And I waved him. I kind of like signaled him to come up to the front, and he refused. He just said, "No, just wait." Well, there were kids waiting in line. They were excited to meet me, and we had to spend time. We spent time with the fans. We talked with them, sell them merch. We'd give them kind of like a full experience. We'd even like spank girls at the merch booth. It was like our merch booth. I don't know if you ever came to our shows during that era, and honestly, just even after me, Society One is just it's mayhem at the merch booth,
Right.
to this day. It's always a spectacle. And so he refused to cut. He sat there, and little did the crowd, the people in line know, the kids in line know, like, and I say kids like 18 to 24,
Mhm.
being like a 39-year-old man now, it's like everybody's a kid these days. But um, you know, he just waited patiently, and I couldn't believe it. I was trying to keep composure. I was trying to like have that really meaningful fan interaction, and he just waited there. And little did they know, like Dimebag was standing behind them. And I swear, I mean, it must have lasted like a long 15 to 20 minutes that he just stood in line like everybody else. He finally gets up to the front, and from what I understand, he talked to Matt Zane, the Lord, first. And he said something like, "Oh, you're that band that has the drummer with the crazy hair," and he's like, I keep seeing you guys in the magazines. And Matt was like, yeah, he's right here, you know. And so Matt sort of introduces us. And, you know, you would never know the way he was acting was like he was just another fan. And from what I understand about Dimebag is just that's how he was, like reaching the summit of like fame and doing everything he did. It never touched him. It never altered his consciousness. Like he was so amazing of a person that he like made everybody feel like they were incredibly important, and like he was just another dude there, like enjoying, you know, meeting people as much as the next person. And so he, you know, he when I met him, I was incredibly starstruck. Like I could barely contain myself, but I did. I actually like maintained, and I met him. I met with him like on the level. The crazy thing about that is, you know, I'd met him 3 years earlier as a fan. I was on the street team for hell, from street team from hell, and I used to pass out like Pantera cassettes and merch, you know, at my school. I was on their street team. And so I would get like backstage passes sometimes. I saw Pantera as much as I could, and they loved their street team. So I actually got to meet Dimebag and Vinny when I was a kid, but I met them in a fan rock star kind of context. So I got to shake his hand, tell him he was my hero, and then essentially walk away. Well, this time he stood in line to meet me, and we were meeting eye to eye, and I just did my best to keep my composure. And he just told me the very first thing he said to me was, you know, I see you in all the magazines. Like you remind me, your image, your look, your big hair, you know, it just reminds me of when I was a kid coming up. And, you know, like I'm just so happy for you guys and everything you're doing. Keep at it. And he reaches for his wallet to like buy our merch. And I said, look, like you waited in line. I get you're humble, but I just can't stomach selling you our merch. Like you're my like like I just can't do that. And so he said, oh, okay, well, you know, Matt gave Dime a CD and I gave him a shirt, and he was so excited to get this merch. I mean, like he wasn't placating, like he wasn't, you know, he wasn't just projecting humility like some rock stars do or some celebrities do. It was real for him. And he while we were talking, the crowd there, they started noticing that, you know, that Dimebag was talking to me and that he was in line with them. And so eventually, you know, it was like a pretty large crowd stood and just kind of watched the interaction. They were blown away. And Vinny walks up, and Vinny was, you know, he was kind of standing from afar, but he kind of looked at me and I just kind of nodded and he nodded. And then Dime, he was kind of telling Dime, all right, it's time to move on. You know, the crowd was starting to notice them there. And not that he was bothered by it, but you know, it's a little bit much to be in such a small venue with Dime and Vinny. Well, they were going to get shots with pissing razors at the bar, and he like invited me to come with them. But I don't know what it was, but the interaction that I had with him was just so fulfilling, and we just met eye to eye that I didn't. It was already too much, and I felt like I was gonna essentially faint, like under the experience that I never thought I'd have. Like it was like my dreams coming true in that moment, actually having like a friendly interaction, man to man, with my greatest hero of all time. And so I was so overwhelmed that I just couldn't handle, you know, like most people would jump at the opportunity to go party with Dime, but it was just too much for me. So I just leaned into him and I said, hey, you know, I just have to say before you leave, like that your work and your life completely shaped the direction and course of my life. Like Pantera, your riffs, your antics, like you were, you know, I had you like your posters on my wall, and like I just would study your videos, you know, the Pantera home videos, and like your music, and it was like the center of my reality my entire teenage years. And just thank you, like thank you for your life. Like I actually I remember thanking him that way. And he just goes, oh yeah, it's all good, you know, like, and then we hugged, and he walked away. And then Matt came up to me and he goes, oh, like, wow, you really handled that pretty well. Like, are you okay? You know, and I just said, hey, like, I've gotta just take a moment for myself. You know, and I remember going outside and just like screaming. Like I know it's kind of embarrassing to like talk about moments where you were just totally starstruck and awestruck, but he just meant so much to me. And I just remember like going, it was like the back, the back area of the venue, like where the alley is, and I just remember yelling like, just filled with so much life energy and gratitude and excitement, like my dreams have come true. And then that was before cell phones and all that. So I remember like going to the payphones and calling, my childhood best friend that, you're not gonna believe this, and unfortunately, like I don't have any pictures with him, but I remember like my whole goal in life was to go on tour with Pantera, like as an opening actor, to just be a part of that whole thing. And that never happened. But I remember that, just a few years later when I heard Dimebag was murdered. I remember hearing about it on the road and pulling over and just hysterically crying because like I it was like my childhood dreams were crushed. Like not only was he my greatest hero, but like I would never get to tour with him and Pantera was over. And but then I remembered like thanking him for his life and just thinking about like what a gift it was that I got to have that experience with him, and there were witnesses like it's hard to believe that, but Eddie Razor, who's the drummer for Pissing Razors, he remembers that interaction. And he was like dear friends with Vinny and Dime, and that was just another night for them. Like they were partying with Pantera all the time. And if you go to like the El Paso scene and hang out at Mulligan's and sort of the underground metal scene there, like many people will just tell you of all the cool nights of partying that when Dime and Vinny would come out to go hang out all night. But that moment was just incredibly a meaningful and something I'll never forget.
I can tell, man. You tell it like it was yesterday. And that's that's yeah, that I remember that night vividly. I was supposed to go to that show. It was roughly, I think it takes about 15 to 20 minutes to get to Alrosa from here. And yeah, it was I remember hearing about the cops being there and everything, and then like the news broke, and I mean, me and all my friends, like I got a buddy that's a just diehard Pantera fan, had a tattoo done and everything, and I mean, we just kind of we didn't know how to feel, man. We were just like, what the hell, and that was, I'd say, probably one of the worst nights in rock and roll history, and it happened here in my damn hometown. So yeah, but I mean, they were great musicians. I remember seeing them with they opened up for Skid Row, which I couldn't believe. I thought Skid Row would open for them, but it was an amazing show. So next question I want to ask you is you guys worked with producer Chris Collar. How
Oh,
what was that? Huh?
yeah, his name is Chris Collier.
Collier, okay. The see it's I suck at pronouncing names, man.
It's all good.
It's like my last name, Boyson. So I mean, he's produced bands like Korn and Whitesnake. So what was it like working with him?
He's a genuinely cool dude. We just actually were in Vegas with him, um, and as prolific as he is, and obviously he has such an impressive discography, working with Whitesnake and Prong and Korn and so on. Um, but he's really open. He's really open to feedback, and I'm always concerned working with people that have made it to that degree because it seems like they get stuck in their ways and
Mm-hmm.
they just don't want to hear any feedback at all. I actually was in a position earlier in life where I gave my opinion about a mix to somebody who mixed like Hootie and the Blowfish, and it looked like he wanted to kill me, and that I was absolutely not welcomed back there in that studio. And it's funny because when the label actually heard the mix, they agreed with my assessment of the mix. But when people kind of arrive, they just get this attitude about it, and they become really fixed in their ways, which is probably why they've become successful to begin with. But they have that strong personality type. But working with him, he was really open. We actually like listened to my drum tracks, and I remember going, like this mix is cool, and I know this is the Collier signature sound, but my playing is a little more jazzy and nuanced than a typical metal drummer. And so there's some things that I feel like may have been lost. And so we broke it apart, and he's a drummer too. And I feel like once he heard the nuance, he made a last minute adjustment to the mix and or to the production itself, and it sounds great. And so we are deciding to work with Chris through this next album, and the album itself is going to be a soundtrack to the movie that we're creating. And the first single, "The Fight Within," is coming out June 28th. And what we're doing is, there's so many records being released and singles being released. So instead of just releasing music, we're doing this cinematically. So since Lord Zane and I have joined forces, I'm a filmmaker, he's a filmmaker. We decided to make this movie together, but we decided to also apply a kind of a cinematic um, approach to releasing the music. So we're going to accompany the music with outstanding visuals and do it in a way that's genuinely exciting, rather than just in a way that's just going to get lost on Spotify.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, Matt's a trippy dude. I did an interview with him a few months ago. And I mean, very cool guy. He was, very responsive to my questions as you are. He just, I mean, I've seen like a lot of his videos and his work and his live Facebooks, and it just I sit there and I laugh, man. I'm like, this guy is crazy. But I mean, whatever he's doing is working because I mean, like you were talking about back then being in all the magazines and everything. And actually the one that you didn't mention that I used to love was Hit Prater.
oh
Because
yeah, Hit Parader was
Hit
great.
Prater always had posters in it. And I was the
Mhm.
same way, man. I had posters all over my wall. So, but yeah, I mean,
See those old Society One posters in Hit Parader?
I probably did. I mean, I probably had them on my wall. I mean, I can't remember. I had so many. I was you couldn't even see my wall anymore. It just I would see a band and I'd hang it up. I mean, back then my favorite bands were like, Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, stuff like that. But since I've been doing this, I've been getting opened up to a lot more different music. And I've really enjoyed it because I mean I've interviewed bands across the pond too, like from Italy and Germany and Finland and stuff. And I mean, it's it's really cool to just, I guess, broaden my horizons because I was kind of like, okay, the new rock I'm kind of getting into and this and that, but then I mean, I've done. I think you're like my 118th interview, and I mean, it's opened my eyes to so much stuff, man. I mean,
Yeah.
it's been a blast.
Yeah, working with Matt is really interesting just because of how multifaceted he is. Like some people are one trick ponies, but I mean the guy is he's like a one-stop shop. Like he can do everything on the crew. He's got the vision. He pulls things together. But what's really interesting about Matt is he has this unique perspective on what the nature of like entertainment really is and what people want.
Mm-hmm.
And little do people know, it's like he always has celebrities in his orbit, like really well-known people that come to him to either help revitalize their career or to like say, how do we release this record? To how do I get my career back on track, or how do I stay relevant to the next generation? And it's like Matt is simultaneously like hated and needed in the industry. People don't want to publicly associate with him, but then they will call him nonstop asking for help. And he just has this. He has a unique energy about him. He has a magnetic energy about him that commands attention. But he also knows how to hack the system. He knows how to like bypass the hierarchy and the sort of gatekeepers of the industry to get the attention. I was like an 18-year-old kid when I joined Society One, and within just a couple of weeks, we were doing a world record breaking suspension video. He was being suspended by meat hooks in a music video. This body suspension doesn't seem so extreme now, but back then, nobody had done it.
Right.
No singer in front of the band had ever done that. And Revolver hit for like every single magazine, even Uranium, which was a big show at the time that you probably remember. They were there, and I just remember like a line of press trying to get Matt's attention, trying to cover it and get their access to it, And just for a relatively obscure band, what other I mean, even B-list acts aren't getting that attention. And I remember like he even taught me how to position myself in a way that was kind of presented me as larger than life. And I listened to his advice after we had the crazy experience in Hollywood where he broke the record, and we just got tons of press nonstop. Where he sort of told me how to like create press clippings in a way and present myself in a way that would make me look like I already made it. And I remember going to the NAMM show shortly thereafter as a kid and just marching right to the Pearl booth and the ProMark booth and showing them like these press hits, but then creating an illusion like I was a somebody and I was a nobody. I mean, I just entered the scene, and I remember the artist relations people at the booths. They just loved it, and within just a few months of going to NAMM, I ended up being featured in like drumstick ads for ProMark, and Pearl Drums put me on their site and had my drum configuration on their site, and you know I was getting a lot of attention I really didn't at the time deserve. But I did that by following Matt's approach to sort of hacking the system, and it worked. I got my endorsements, but it was just really interesting to like open Modern Drummer magazine at 19 years old and like see me on the inner sleeve, like right when you open the magazine to see my full page ads there with like Dave Lombardo and my heroes,
Right.
like and it's really interesting working with him, not just collaboratively with music, but just making films and just being in this game in general, just because there's just nobody like him.
Yeah. So you guys are hitting the road February 24th. You're going out with Static X, Fear Factor, and Dope on the Rise of the Machine tour. Tell me about that. You guys looking forward to it?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is like everything we want. Static X, um, Static X and Fear Factory both. I used to save my lunch money when I was in high school to see them play in Hollywood, and they were some of my favorite bands coming up. I love that 99 to like 2003 era was one of my favorite eras in metal because of those two bands.
Yeah.
And to be on tour with them is it's a dream come true. It's a dream come true in a certain capacity. Like I just love them, and it's really cool. But what's really special for me, and Matt has his own perspective, but what's really special for me is that this is the 20-year anniversary of Exit Through Fear, and so I was 20 years ago. I was in the band and we were touring, and I left the band shortly thereafter. I was in the band for a couple of years, and and now I'm 39 years old, and it's a reunion, and so it's just really interesting to come back to be working so closely with Matt again for this reunion. So not only is it cool to be on tour with Dope and Static X and Fear Factory, but it's amazing to have this reunion experience and do it in such an epic way with we're gonna be making this movie on tour. So we're taking the movie on tour. We've got these music videos coming out, we got the drum playthroughs coming out. There's just so much creativity. I noticed that when Matt and I work so closely together, there's this magic that happens, and we sort of antagonize each other's creative spirit, and we're just doing a lot together, and it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I tell you, I've seen Fear Factory and Dope both. I've never seen Static X. I know they're coming here. Are you guys? I didn't see it on the tour list. You guys aren't coming to Columbus with them?
We aren't going to be in Columbus with them, no.
No, that sucks. Because I mean, the King of Clubs, man, that's pretty awesome venue, and I'm looking forward to seeing Static X, even though it's not Wayne Static anymore. It's still, the music and everything.
You know what though? And I saw Static X countless times with Wayne, and how they're doing it is it's just such a great tribute to Wayne's legacy, and it's a truly authentic experience. Like what they're doing as a band is brilliant, and it's real, it's authentic. It's not like a money grab or a gimmick. It's not a letdown. It sounds like Wayne is in the room, and with the original lineup, it's It's really special. I actually got to see Static X a couple, maybe what, 2 or 3 years ago, come through town, and I was worried, because I didn't want my like my childhood, experience that was so incredible to be wrecked, and to see something that just didn't work. But it was, the magic was there, and so I strongly suggest coming out and experiencing it.
Yeah, I really want to. There's a lot of bands that I wish I would have went and seen back in the day, man. But it for some reason or another it didn't happen. But so what kind of drums do you use, man? I mean, what's your preferred drum kit? Your cymbals, your sticks? I mean,
Yeah, well, I feel because Pearl and Promark were so good to me when I was just a kid coming up, I'm still pretty married to those brands. One thing that I have seen just in the last like 10 years is all these new companies coming up. Like I feel like there's this great decentralization in percussion manufacturing now. Like there are great uh, new disruptive brands that sound amazing and maybe even sound better than pearls now. But I just love my pearls. I play a 6 ply birch pearl set, and I hope to just keep playing pearls. But maybe I would change my mind if I played some of these other sets. I don't know. But my drumsticks, I play Promark drumsticks. They're the best drumsticks ever made. There's no reason to play any other stick. I play 747 wood tips for metal. When I play more jazzy fusion stuff, I use the 7As. And then cymbals, whatever sounds good. Like I don't have a brand.
I see. You talk about the the jazzy fuse, and that's a lot of drummers talked to have actually kind of drawn from that recently, and not even just like I mean, Mike Portnoy is one of them. I've heard Steven Adler. Just several drummers that have used that style. And so, is there a difference between that and like the metal style, other than like double bass, or what's the difference there?
So there are different currents that sort of define types of playing, and it's not cookie cutter, right? I think that rudimentary snare type playing, like marching snare type playing, will lead into metal playing really well. So a lot of times you'll find that these incredible straight ahead metal players are drawing from marching snare influence, and then also tribal influence. So there's a straight ahead style in tribal drumming,
Uh-huh.
uh, and also it's rudiment based in straight ahead metal drumming. And then you'll also notice that there are styles that you'll find in more progressive metal that is influenced by jazz fusion and Latin beats, Latin polyrhythmic beats. I have more of a basis in jazz and Latin because I was actually, back in the day, I was playing with jazz combos and big bands and Latin bands before I sort of was swooped up by the metal industry. So a lot of times when people hear my stuff recorded, they just can't they just don't understand where it's coming from, because I'll be playing like a songa, like polyrhythm. It sounds like I'm playing straight ahead, but in fact, I'm playing the opposite of what they think they're hearing. So when drummers try to play some of my, like I did a record a few years ago that was toured with by another drummer, and I remember him coming up to me just saying like, I just can't understand what you're playing. I'm like, dude, you sound great, but this guy had more of a Vinnie Paul straight ahead feel, and I have a more nuanced kind of jazzy Latin feel, and it works either way. But when I'm playing, I try to balance the two, because I have both traditions that I have the snare. I kind of have a bit of both, but I'm not I just can't play straight ahead. Like I can, for verses, I can do my best to or to play the typical thrash. But I'll give you a good example. Like Dave Lombardo is the perfect combination of the two. So
Right.
Dave Lombardo, even though he defined thrash playing when he was 20 years old, he defined thrash playing, which is straight ahead. If you listen to his his playing, it kind of ebbs and flows out of meter, and his fills are very jazzy, the way how musical his fills are. And then
Mhm.
if you hear Dave Lombardo play with like Fantomas or Mr. Bungle, you can hear the full extent of his musicality come out. He's a very intellectual drummer, but he's very jazzy, and it's just so clear when he's playing with those bands. But the sort of opposite of that is like the Raymond Herrera's, and where they're playing like machines, like Raymond Herrera from Fear Factory. In
Mhm.
my opinion, he sort of defined um, that straight ahead mechanical machine like playing that I think the majority of the metal and hard rock tradition sort of comes from after the turn of like right after the millennium, like right between 99 and 2003 ish. It seemed like every metal drummer wanted to sound like Raymond Herrera at the time. Now, when you hear Raymond Herrera's playing, before it was like there's no way a human is playing that. It's lightning fast and it's too mechanical. There's no way that's real. And now, when you hear drummers 20 years later, it's like they're playing even twice as fast as Raymond Herrera, and they sound like perfect. Which a lot of that, unfortunately, is done in post production, but the drummers these days are just they're pretty psychotic with their playing. So you have the jazzy style and you have the more mechanical style that comes from two different traditions.
Um, you ever play at the Newport Music Hall here in Columbus?
I never played Newport, but I played Al Rosa. And there's a theater on, what was that theater? So there's the Al Rosa, but then there's the street that the university is on.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's
High
that's
Street. High Street.
yeah, that's
The,
Newport.
okay, I have played the Newport then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's an old venue, man. But I remember seeing Anthrax there, and Charlie, dude, I was like, there's the floor, and then there's it kind of comes up like this, and I was up against the railing, and I'm trying to see behind, the drum kit because this dude's feet were moving so damn fast, and I'm like, man, that just doesn't sound real. But I get what you're saying. I mean, Charlie's a hell of a
He's a real jazzy player too. I just, you know, I, I just love his style. I think he's just he's got a brilliant groove style. He's a monster. So,
All right, brother. Well, I just have one more question for you, and then we'll conclude the interview. You was kind of getting into the jazz fusion and the Latin roots and this and that, but what is it that really influenced you to pick up, the drumsticks and just start at it, man? I mean, how old was you when it started?
well, I think it was I grew up in a pretty bad neighborhood, and I grew up with like gangster rap, and so the idea of like playing an instrument just it wasn't appealing to me at all. But then I ended up being moved into like a nicer neighborhood, another city, and I had no friends and I was a total outcast. And so I just decided like, okay, well, I'm gonna, I got to do something. And so I gave drums a try, and it was like as soon as I picked up my drumsticks, like I just felt at home. It was almost like this genetic memory, like as soon as I picked up my sticks, I was a drummer. It wasn't like, hey, I'm gonna dabble. And what I started on percussion, but what made me want to play drums was hearing Pantera for the first time. Like when I heard metal, I remember the first metal I ever heard was Pantera. And then shortly thereafter, I heard like Cannibal Corpse and some death metal and then Sepultura and sort of entered that way. But it was Pantera, but it wasn't just the music, it was like the lifestyle. And I wanted to be a part of that life. And so Pantera, but Vinnie Paul had a big influence on me, but I think who had the biggest influence on my playing was Mike Borden from Faith No More.
Mhm.
Like I quickly got into Faith No More and Mr. Bungle and Fantomas but Mike Borden's playing, it just was, it hit me in a really deep way. And then, getting into Soundgarden and that sort of era as well. But Mike Borden's playing was just, and Faith No More, like Mike Patton was like a god to me when I it was like Pantera in that scene, and then it was like Mike Patton and Faith No More and that whole like ecosystem that he created. But it was just wanting to express myself like they were, and I couldn't do it just as a percussionist, so I started, you know, playing drums. But I had a unique childhood because I ended up getting picked up with like jazz bands really young, and so I actually was able to like leave school and go play jazz festivals with the local college band, and I got to kind of live like do the touring life. And I sort of sailed through school because I was just the sort of eccentric drummer. I didn't have to like perform academically at all. They just like wrote in my grades and I just got to do whatever I wanted, you know, basically. And then right when I hit 18 is when I saw, well, what was interesting. Are we done with this interview, or do you want to hear how I joined Society One? Because it's pretty strange how that happened.
I mean, basically, I've got 3 minutes left on
Oh,
my.
okay, cool. Well, I when I was coming up in the scene, I remember like saving up my lunch money to see Pissing Razors play. And Society One happened to be opening for Pissing Razors. And I was like a kid, I think I was 16 years old at the Whiskey. And I just remember seeing Matt Zane on stage, and he like represented everything that I was looking for in the metal lifestyle, like the girls, the antics. He was just larger than life. And he was the opening act. I didn't know who Society One was. Well, coincidentally, I saw in this, I saw a classified for Society One looking for a drummer, and I ended up going and auditioning, and I guess they were replacing Ivan DePrume from Rob Zombie or
Mhm.
White, and you know they tried out like 50 drummers, and I remember just like going in. I heard the songs like one time, and I just nailed it. Um, and I got in the band. That's how I got in the band. So
That's awesome, man. I mean,
yeah.
it sounds like you've had a really illustrious career so far. I mean, and you guys are getting ready to hit the road again. I mean, I wish that you were coming to Columbus. Like I said, I looked up and down there. I was like, man, there's no damn Columbus, Ohio. But
Yeah.
maybe I can get out, to one of the closer shows. I have to look at them again, see what's close to Ohio. But anyways, I appreciate your time.
Yeah, and your listeners can they can sort of follow the journey of the movie and Society One and the stuff that I'm doing with my career. We're on TikTok. But if you want to check out the movie, go to shockrockmovie.com, and you can see all the Shock Rock socials. We're actually going to be releasing like an extended trailer in January for the movie, so your listeners can follow Shock Rock Movie. It's going to be an outrageous movie, so we're going to be dripping out content along the way. And then you could check out societyonemusic.com, and then if you're interested in following what I'm doing, go to dagondestroyer.com. But yeah, thank you for the interview.
All right, man. I will definitely check all that out because, like I said, Matt was entertaining. I really enjoyed the interview with you. Love the music, so I will make sure that it gets checked out, man.
Cool.
All right,
Thanks.
you have a good afternoon.
You too, man. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.